I'm Tracy. I have spent my entire adult life in the fitness industry in one venue or another. Um, I've competed in just about every sport that you that you can imagine over the years. But honestly, CrossFit is really what led me into my love for just lifting weights. I didn't quite know what powerlifting was or anything then, but once I found powerlifting, I spent the next 10 or 15 years competing with powerlifting. And I think a couple of years ago, I decided that, it was time to retire and move in a different direction. So last this past April was my first bodybuilding show, and 6 weeks later was my second at Junior USA's where I got my pro card. So we are currently working towards our pro debut. And in my spare time, I am also a full-time coach, and I work in a completely different arena as well. So I work with all different types of clients. I work with a lot of veterans, seniors, um, beginners. I've worked with powerlifters, you name it. So I'm a little bit of everything right now. And then I have two kids and two American bullies.
Nice.
So my life is a little bit full at the moment.
Where did the initial want for that kind of we're looking at CrossFit? Where did the want for that kind of initial activity and mode of exercise really start and come from?
I think I was, without knowing at the time, I think I was searching for my obsession. I was just, I didn't know what it was, but, I did everything. I ran 5Ks, 10Ks, marathon, I did venture races, when all that was the thing. And I competed in one thing after another. I competed in, softball, played softball for years. It was one thing after another, but nothing was kind of the thing. I enjoyed it, but it was never enough. It was never challenging enough. It was never enough to lose myself in. And I enjoyed CrossFit, but the parts that I enjoyed were the strength training aspects. So when we would compete and I would be on a team, I would do all the deadlift ladders and the front squat maxes. That was that was my role. And I let them run and do the rest of the stuff. That just wasn't what I enjoyed. I just knew that I wanted to be strong. I loved the feeling of being strong. I love the feeling of training. And that's what it's always been about for me. It really has never been about, of course, I've loved the sports, but it's always been about training,
Gotcha.
finding a new way. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess CrossFit just being more commercialized, you kind of had easier access into that first versus powerlifting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you know where I'm from, and in southern West Virginia and eastern Kentucky, there are not a lot of things to choose from. There's not a lot. This is not a fitness minded area. I mean, things are changing more in the last decade or so, but I'm sure you know this is not. We're not the mecca of fitness. So I think CrossFit caught my attention because all these new boxes were popping up at that time, and people were saying how difficult it was, and I was kind of like, okay, we'll see. So I ended up getting my CrossFit level ones, my gymnastic certs, my Olympic lifting. I just started picking up certs as I went along through CrossFit. But just like with anything, there's the good and the bad. And I think the bad outweighed the good for me with CrossFit. So
Gotcha.
it was kind of the bridge. It was a gateway drug, I guess you can say, to eventually to bodybuilding.
Right. And I've never done CrossFit, so how does the certification stuff actually work? Is that like w- is that while you're doing it, or is it kind of like this additional thing that you have to go do, or do people come to you while
Well, it
you're
depends on which
training?
one, what you're doing.
Gotcha.
So I originally got my degree in sports medicine and athletic training. So I worked with a lot of college sports and college athletes. And then as the years went on, whatever I was doing, I was trying to just pick up additional certifications, additional knowledge, whatever I could do. With the CrossFit level ones and level two, you go in for a weekend at a location in Ohio. It's just, the same thing. But like when I got my gymnastics, ollie lifting, all those, you had to travel. So you may have to go, you know, 3 or 4 states away. But that was my beef, is it was really just a weekend course and it wasn't really intensive enough, especially, the CrossFit level one, level two, when you have people underneath you in a group class setting. I just don't feel it was enough. It was a money grab, I would say, more than
Right.
anything. The majority of the people who come in your class are out of shape. You know, these are not pro athletes that are coming into you. And that was one of the things that I've kind of had a beef with every certification that I've gotten over the years, and what eventually led me into my niche, as well as CrossFit. All of these certifications that people get, not your degrees, but your certifications, they all teach you how to work with perfectly healthy people. And when in reality, that is maybe 5% of your clientele.
Mm.
Most people that you work with, whether it's CrossFit or powerlifting, whatever it is, they have some sort of issue or restriction. So it was almost a good thing looking back that things happened the way they did, because it allowed me to get frustrated. And then when I became frustrated, I became curious and thought, well, there has to be a solution. With CrossFit, for example, people were constantly hurt in one way or another. And some of these were minor, and then some of these were major. As I began to see over the years, people would go to physical therapy, and then there would still be a huge gap from where they are now and where they still need to be. But you're cut loose from physical therapy. You're finished. You're whole. So that really kind of led into curiosity for me. Okay, so what do I need to do? Somebody needs to be able to help these people
Yeah.
who still want to get back to doing what they did before. So that kind of led me into my niche over the years, that little bit of frustration and curiosity. Um, finding a need. This is what they say: if you want to be successful in anything, is find a need, and then fill it. So all the certs really the disappointments in the certs over the years really helped me become a better coach, and constantly reevaluating what are the holes in these certs, because nobody you work with, or everybody has something going on.
What was kind of that, if there was one, that final straw that kind of broke the camel's back when it came to CrossFit for you, that made you want to look elsewhere and maybe switch to powerlifting? Are you a personal trainer, online fitness coach, or gym owner on the verge of burnout? Are you wanting to grow your fitness business but can't add more hours to your hectic schedule? Introducing Trainer Revenue Multiplier, the premier wealth creation system for fitness professionals that helps you earn more and work less. Visit www.trainerrevenuemultiplier.com today to schedule your free business accelerator session. If you're serious about taking your business to the next level, schedule your call today.
It wasn't that, any hatred towards CrossFit. It's just, I remember we had a separate room in our CrossFit box. If you wanted to do just your own thing, accessories, whatever. And I was constantly in that room trying to improve my skill set, working on handstand push-ups, working on whatever. That was my thing with CrossFit. It was so much that I needed to work on. And I remember seeing this guy back there get jacked over like 2 months. And I mean, I'm talking like, he was probably one of the first people that I saw, like, visually over a few months, massive change, was getting incredibly strong. And I remember being so irritated, because I was like, how are you doing how are you doing this? Because it was a different type of training than I had went to school for. It was a different type of training than I'd ever seen. I'd never seen someone train quite that way. And he said, I'm powerlifting. I'm getting ready for a powerlifting meet. And I thought, you know what? Let's see what we can do here. So for a long time, I did a blend. I legitimately would CrossFit a few times a week and then powerlift in the evenings. It was so stupid, but that's just what happens when you're young and you have a love for training. I just love to work hard. I love that place in my mind that I could go to, because you can only really focus on one thing at a time. And when you're training intensely, everything else goes away. So for a long time, I blended the two, and I did my first powerlifting meet, and I thought, this is it. Like, this is the thing. And over the years, I just gradually shifted more of my attention to the powerlifting world. Once I realized that I could really compete at a higher level than I thought that I could compete, I really just kind of eliminated everything else, and powerlifting was my life for about 10 or 15 years, a solid decade of it.
Right. And for you, did you have like a period there when you first started that you were maybe frustrated at all because like you were still doing both and you didn't really understand why maybe that you weren't seeing the exact like results that this other person was seeing?
I actually was, and that was when I realized that I could do this. It's more of a because initially I was thinking I'll just do a meet, I'll just try this thing out. I'll just do a meet because you really don't know what your potential is when you first get started. So, my first, and I actually had a coach, and I did what he said, but I always did more. That was back in the day when I thought, you know, more is better. An hour training is great, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever. More is more is more. And but I learned after that first meet that I could do this. That I had the potential to do this, and it was one of those things where I thought, you're either going to have to go all in with this, or you're never going to be competitive with it. And I'm super competitive, whether we're playing checkers, whatever it is. I'm in it to win it. So I think that, we were talking earlier about I was looking for my obsession, and I thought the obsession was powerlifting, but what the obsession actually was that really brutal hard training that powerlifting kind of led me into. And the culture at that time with powerlifting was it was amazing. It was when it was still underground. It really wasn't Instagram famous like like it is now. You didn't have a lot of women in the
Right.
sport, especially ones that looked like didn't look like 80s gym teachers. You would go to a meet and there would maybe be one or two women. I competed with men most of the time, especially in this area. There were no large groups of women competing. So it was the culture, it was the training. I was all in after my first meet. That was it.
How did your perception of just like how you should train and like um what things that to do and all that kind of stuff because you were training mostly around men?
I learned to put my education to work on a daily instead of just when you're working with someone else because your training evolves. It evolves and it's individual. And for a long time, I made a lot of mistakes because I'm so passionate when I'm in something, I am completely in it. So I would train with the men, and I remember I wasn't allowed to use the mono lift until I could squat 3 plates for reps. There was just you had to squat on a rack by yourself somewhere. On Saturdays, we had team days, and we would have everybody come in on a Saturday just to squat, and we would squat and train hard for hours and go out to eat together. And it was such a great culture. And I learned from the men that they didn't care as long as I was serious. Once I was serious and they respected that I was there to work and I was there to compete, then it was easy breezy. But I had to learn what it takes to be in a training group with men. I had to learn to hand off 500-pound benches. I had to learn to squat under 700-800-pound squats. I learned quite a bit from that, and I learned how to train hard over those years. And I think that is a blessing because they didn't treat me like a female. They expected me to train just as hard as everyone else. And I learned that this notion, even though I had this education, it was the application that I learned. In the back of my mind, I still had these limiting beliefs that, women don't train that hard, not that hard. And I learned good and bad because I learned this mentality that was at the time in old school powerlifting that it doesn't matter if you're hurt, you're still there. We still train. If you can walk, you can train. So I would be injured and tear something in my quad and roll on a scooter underneath the machines while everybody was training. So I learned both wonderful habits and very dysfunctional habits at the same time, and that was from the culture. That was just the culture at the time. It was almost a badge of pride to train injured during those years. It was um, how tough are you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was just a really strange mentality, but that was the worst thing that I learned from those years because I didn't trust my knowledge. I allowed my feelings and my passion to influence my training too much during those years. So good and bad, but I'm grateful for every bit of it. Where
Yeah.
I'm at, where I'm at.
And was it hard to make that transition from different types of training styles
First
with your
started
client?
training, it really wasn't like that. So my CrossFit training benefited me because when you're training with a group, the way we had it, say for example, it was squat day, you know, first person goes, second person is loading, spotting. We were moving constantly when you're training with a group. It's your time to go. If you're not going, you're wrapping knees. You're working. So that really helped me in that aspect. But once I had my first really brutal training day, that was it for me. It wasn't that hard of a transition once I had my first brutal day and felt it was one of the first times I really felt like I was part of a team too, a part of a group. And that is hugely addictive. It's something that's kind of missing now that, we're in the social media age. Everyone trains alone with their tripod.
Mhm.
When I first started those years of training with a team and learning how to function in that, as a group and be a good teammate and a partner, that was invaluable to me.
Yeah.
It's something's gone now. A lot of gyms you had to go in as part of the team. So if you wanted somebody to come to meet and wrap your knees and handle you, then you were required to go to that person's meet, handle them, help them. So it was a time requirement. That's why I think a lot of people are not invested anymore because you were required to be there for other people if you expected them to be there for you. There weren't a lot of groupies and, people weren't producing content during those days. It was, do you want someone to come in and lift off for you when you need to bench heavy? Then you need to be here for everyone else. So it was very much an unselfish mentality during those days, but you learned so much because when you would come in and, come in to hand off the bench for someone, you would learn so much from that person because you learned from the people in the group who were more experienced than you.
Yeah.
Now people learn from other influencers who, a lot of times have never done anything. They're just regurgitating someone else's theory of, what you need to do to put on mass on your shoulders or whatever, and they're built like a pencil. This is the culture now. So I think some of us who are in between those generations really kind of struggle with seeing how far we've fallen from the team days where you would go to a powerlifting meet and you would see teams of people. Not You didn't see 50 individuals, you would see teams. I think what people miss out is that generation, the previous to the social media generation, they will never get on there and share everything they know because, and I know quite a few people of that age that they're just not technology, that's not their thing. They're not savvy with it. It frustrates them. That's just not the way they are. So I feel like that group of people, if you don't get in the gym and actually talk to them, and train from them and ask them, hey, what would you do for this? What do you like for this? Has this ever happened to you? You miss out on that because it's never going to be on Instagram reel. It's these people, that's just not their generation. So I feel like we're missing out on that knowledge being passed down because people don't really communicate in the gym with each other. No one wants to know what the guy in the corner who's done 147 shows, who's like 60 years old.
Yeah.
Maybe he knows, maybe he knows something, but it's
Yeah.
just I think a different mentality right now.
It is, I think. And it used to be in the gym, like the biggest guy or the fittest person used to be kind of like your fitness Google, right? I mean, that's who you would go to ask, and now it's completely different. When did you feel like you kind of hit your like when did you feel like you hit kind of your max potential, and then or if you did, and then when did you feel like at some point you started thinking about where can I go next?
I think 2020 started to shift perspective for everyone on the planet in one way or another because we were all forced to be still and kind of self-evaluate. When we're busy, it's so easy to purposely not go to those places in your mind and deal with the things that you need to deal with. We're just busy. And I knew for years that powerlifting was not the sport that I had the best genetic potential for. I did very well. I was on the all-time list in 3 different weight classes, squatted and pulled in the 500s, back when women, a lot of women were not pulling. That was when 500 was the was what 600 is now, so but all that time I stayed injured. constantly. I tore everything that you can tear and rehabbed it myself. I would train and deadlift with a tens unit on my back. It got so bad towards the end. And I knew from my background as a coach, I would never allow anyone else to do the things that I did, but I justified it for myself because I loved it so much and I loved competing and this meant so much to me that literally I spent my life in pain. I was eating ibuprofen just to function, just to be able to sleep. Sleep, what is sleep? Because every move I made hurt constantly. And I was sitting there in 2020 and I was like, what are we doing? Because I was always outside of the all-time record range. I was always just outside of that. And I thought, sis, this is not your genetics. You know that, you've reached where genetically you are, your potential is outside because we all have lines. And there were certain lines that I was not willing to cross, things I was not willing to do. And that was also the point in powerlifting where women were starting to really take their foot off the brake when it comes to having limits with PEDs and things that they would do. So you were seeing this big explosion. You were seeing numbers, the records that would stand for, maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years. You were seeing records just go back and forth, change, quickly, quickly, quickly. And 2020 was a big year. So I thought, I want to do one more. I was like, I wanted to retire on my own terms. I wanted to prep myself. I was not going to cut weight. I was just going to. Then I get COVID 3 weeks out from my last meet. Horribly sick. It was the first round of COVID. Couldn't set any attempts. Had no numbers at the meet. Had no openers. Had nothing. It was just one of those things. But I wanted to retire on my own terms. I knew that I would have to find some other way to continue to train hard. And I'd always wanted to bodybuild, but I'd listened to people who had said that I wasn't made for it, or I could never do it, or I was too big, or I was too this, or, whatever. So I really had never allowed myself mentally to even think that was possible for me. But it just got to the point, honestly, that I had that tough discussion with myself and said, as a coach, you would never allow anyone else to do what you're doing, to train the way you're training, to push through the things you're pushing through. Like what are you doing? you know? So I think that was the thing for me that allowed me to be honest with myself and say, could I have continued powerlifting at just a casual level? No, because with the way that I am, I can't casually do anything.
Right.
So I knew that I needed to either continue or just completely stop with powerlifting because I knew that a career ending injury was coming, not an if. I knew that one of those horrible, you're never the same injuries it was headed down the pipeline for me.
Gotcha. And then how long in between that kind of thought process and then really seriously looking into bodybuilding?
Well, I spent some time and completely fixed all the imbalances that you don't want to correct when you're powerlifting. Not to say you don't want to correct some, but I think people forget in this optimal world that we live in that some sort of imbalance is what makes you good at this very specific thing that you do. So there were certain imbalances that I needed to have in order to be the deadlifter that I was, in order to hit those numbers. But were they good for real life and for functionality? No. So I took a period and really humbled myself and fixed all the things that I knew needed to be fixed, addressed all the imbalances, and just wanted to be able to train hard in whatever thing. So I thought about what would scare me the most. What was the thing that people told me I couldn't do? What was the thing that no women in this area were doing? Bodybuilding. There are some bikini girls in this area, and I think maybe one or two wellness girls, but there were no bigger girls, in this area. So I thought, what terrifies me the most? Let's do that thing. Let's try that. So that was within really just a few month period because I was also started working with Alan Kress at that time because I wanted to make sure that all my blood work was right, that all my hormones were, right where they needed to be in order to go into bodybuilding because I wanted to be healthy and whole before doing something else, something else. So, and then Alan kind of guided me during that time with, starting my thought process to shift. What might I need to change? What things might need to be brought up? What things do we need to bring down? So he kind of started the mindset. So I credit Alan Kress a lot with helping me believe that it was possible to do this.
So what specifically you said kind of, it scared you and things like that, but what specifically was it that really scared you about bodybuilding?
The lack of control for the competition. Because with powerlifting, yes, you do have judges, but at the end of the day, whether you make the lift or miss it, 99% of the time, that's you. That is you that has that under control. Either you did the training, you peaked right, you did all the things, or you didn't. There's no one to blame. It's very individual, and you have planning, you have preparation, and then you have an aspect of heart that goes with it. And that was everything to me. With bodybuilding, to me, what terrified me was the subjectiveness of it. You know, I could stand before 8 judges and maybe they think 8 different things, that was out of my control. And that was what was terrifying to me. And then I also had worked my entire life to make sure I had a good relationship with food. And I wasn't sure how I would feel coming out of a first prep because it was very unknown to me. And as a mother, especially a mother of a daughter, I wanted to make sure that I did not develop any dysfunctional habits and bring those into my home that would affect her in any capacity because that's my hard line. I have 2 kids. My oldest has Asperger's and goes to college from home this year, but I want to make sure that whatever I do doesn't negatively affect my kids. So that was a huge concern for me.
Gotcha. Yeah. Are you a personal trainer who wants to scale and grow your business online? Have you been coaching online for years, yet don't know how to incorporate online into your current business model? Introducing Trainer Revenue Multiplier, the premier wealth creation system for fitness professionals that helps you earn more and work less. Visit www.trainerrevenuemultiplier.com today to schedule your free business accelerator session. If you're serious about taking your business to the next level, schedule your call today.
I think with powerlifting during those years, people were not really overly considered about the health aspects. That was just not. Now things are shifting and it's a wonderful direction where people are much more concerned. Am I getting blood work regularly? What does this look like? What kind of supplements can I take to prevent issue XYZ? How can I adjust my training optimal? All those things. When I first started training, it wasn't like that. It was, is your blood pressure high? Let's go and donate some blood. That was the general attitude towards health. But as a coach, I always tried to, get regular blood work and make sure that everything was optimal as much as possible. But people aren't honest with the fact that competing takes a toll. When you compete at the higher levels of any sport, it takes a toll. And it wasn't just physically for me. I had allowed my stress where I was injured so much, my cortisol was out of control. I was constantly in pain, constantly in fight or flight. So it wasn't just the physical I had to change, it was also the mentality. I had to really change my way of thinking. I had to let go of that identity that I created for myself, as a power lifter. It's a really um, a mind trip when you are competitive in a sport for so long and then you no longer do that anymore, and you're entering something else and you really don't have this identity. So it was a lot of shifting because it was also changing times, but I wanted to make sure that my body was in the right position to even attempt a bodybuilding prep. You know, I didn't want to, you don't want to start in a hole.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest thing for me. So I wanted to make sure that I was hormonally in the right spot. And not just that, I wanted to make sure that I was mentally in the right spot to do it, to
Yeah,
do whatever it took.
for sure. And I think that a lot of people who kind of just these days they want to do a bodybuilding show, right? So they kind of just jump into it. I think that's one of the biggest things that I hear is as a mistake is like make sure that you're mentally and physically, like you said, not in a hole because you're kind of digging yourself in this hole during a prep anyway, right? So
Yeah.
if you're not building yourself or kind of I guess breaking yourself down from a solid foundation, then you're just going to become, you're not putting yourself in a spot for success in that way. But when you did first start bodybuilding, was it hard at all for you to make that mental transition from I'm a power lifter and these are kind of my thoughts and these are kind of like, even though you may know, okay, this is the X, Y, and X's and O's of what to do as a bodybuilder, you still kind of had the patterns of a power lifter.
It was the intensity adjustment for me because I was always an incredibly intense powerlifter. I lifted in a very unhealthy space for a lot of years. Um, it was rage. I stayed in rage, a rage I could tap into it and flip the switch and go there, and I could do impossible things. Um, but it was mentally and emotionally draining. It was not healthy for me. And I tried to carry that into bodybuilding, and I remember thinking, this is not going to work. This is you cannot go there, for a set of lat pull downs. Like you really don't need to go to the darkest place in your soul for this. Like let's calm down and find a different way to get where you need to go because it's a completely different place that I need to go mentally. So I really had to deal with the emotional things. Why did I feel like I needed to tap into that place so often? What itch was I scratching there? What did I need to deal with? Okay, how can I go to the place I need to with bodybuilding in a better headspace? I don't need to feel like I'm going to put my head through the wall every time I do, a set of leg curls. There's different ways to get to the same destination. So I really needed to learn how to train in a way that was healthier for me mentally. So it took me a while to even be able to push the way I needed to with bodybuilding because I had to pull back so much in
Mm.
order to learn. And then also with powerlifting, it doesn't matter how you move the weight, it really doesn't matter what muscle you use, whatever, as long as you get from A to B. But with bodybuilding, I really needed to pull back because I was stronger with my compensations than I was with using my actual muscles. So I really had to pull back. So the first bit with bodybuilding was not really intense training. I had to learn how to train I had to learn how to walk before I could run with bodybuilding. So it was really a challenge there for a while, especially failure sets. When I first started doing failure sets, wow, that was a bit of an adventure. I had to really learn to calm down. And it was strange too, leaving the gym without feeling like you'd been beaten to death the way that
Right.
I would with powerlifting, not unable to even put your shoes on. So it was a huge shift for me.
Yeah. Did it take a while to even just feel fulfilled leaving the gym?
I set different, I had to set like different goals, different little checklists through the day. So, I was constantly pushing rep ranges, constantly pushing other ways, time under tension, being able to hang in the suffering a little bit longer. So I found other ways to kind of check that box in my mind to keep me going. But I think the challenge was what was addictive to me. I loved feeling like I was learning all over again. I loved feeling like I had to dig myself out of a hole, if that makes sense. At the beginning of sport, I loved it. I loved it. The early days were my favorite when I didn't know how to pose. I didn't know nobody here knows how to pose. There are no bodybuilders in my gym. There was no one to ask. There's just figuring it out. And there's something really powerful about letting yourself feel like a complete fool while you're learning something that I will never forget those days. Those were the best days.
And how did the community respond as well? Like, the people who you were doing powerlifting with before, and even maybe who you did CrossFit with before that, like, how did they respond to you going into bodybuilding?
A lot of people left and walked away because they thought I was done after I retired from powerlifting. People were really just like, that's it from her. She's done. I think because those months where I was fixing things, it didn't really look exciting to people, seeing somebody pull back and modify movements and make corrections. It wasn't exciting. So a lot of people walked away. But I always think whoever's meant to stay stays. And I learned more from that period than anything. With bodybuilding, I train still 99% of the time I train alone, still yet. And I'm good with it. Like really, I've never really needed someone to to push me, if that makes sense. I would like a partner to just to pull me back and make sure I don't die on a failure set. That's it. But there are enough people in the gym that they really take care of me when I need a little help. So
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about that first prep and maybe, the next one as well. Like what you went through, what that experience was like, and just having to be what you were talking about, kind of going through that fear and really, can I take on this challenge?
it was almost a childlike exploration because I didn't know what I was supposed to look like at any point in time. When you've been bodybuilding for a while, you have a relative idea. This is how I should look 12 weeks out or 8 weeks out. I had no point of comparison. So every day was just like, I don't know. It was wonderful in the aspect of every day was just like a new adventure. And I was learning so much because I knew how to train hard. I knew how to work hard. I've been dedicated, I think, for out of 10 or 12 years of training, I think I may have missed like 3 weeks over 10 or 12 years. I never missed. I knew how to suffer, but this was different because it's bodybuilding so all consuming. Powerlifting, you work incredibly hard and you stay within a range for your weight class, if you're competing in a weight class. But once you go home, you're resting, but that's generally it. Bodybuilding, that first prep was just all consuming. I had uh, morning and night cardio and training and posing classes, and I was working full time, and I have 2 kids who have to be picked up from school and all their events and all the things. So I was working insane hours, but it was almost a joyful experience because I was learning day by day that I've been capable of so much more for so long and have sold myself short consistently because it's a requirement with prep. You're doing more all the time, you're finding more, and you think this is it. This is the most that I can do. I can't possibly work any harder. And then the next week it's you're going to work harder but with less food, or there's always a constant challenge. So I absolutely loved going into those dark corners of my mind and finding those places of resistance, those pushback, that I can't do this, I won't do this. It was the best experience of my life. But I'm a little weird. So I loved it though. I mean, it was horrible. I mean, it was horrible in the best way because we really do sell ourselves short in what we think we're capable of doing. Even with time management, we all manage our time, but with prep, I had to manage my minutes, not just hours. Like
Yeah.
if I got behind an hour, I was done. There was no way to get everything in. So it's magical once you realize that bodybuilding is a gift for showing you that you are capable of so much more, that we are generally lazy. We do the bare minimum. We think we don't, but you learn through preps that you can do so much more. you know so that was wonderful for that first prep. The show, I think I had 6 weeks between, and we ended up putting on 6 pounds, which was a complete head trip for me because once again this was different. I had never done a back-to-back show. I'd only done one show, and I was not really aware of what changes we were going to be able to make in 6 weeks time. And that was wild, just watching literally the last week or two. The pictures from morning and night were different, and it was almost like the childlike wonder that I hope I don't lose with bodybuilding because things change so quickly. But the second show was a completely different experience because I'd never even been to a national show before. I'd never even been to a regular bodybuilding show before I did my first show. I'd never even been in the doors of one. So I had no idea how things went, what to expect. I flew in completely alone because the tickets were, I think, 1,000 plus
Oh,
to get down there for that weekend. So I couldn't ask anyone to go with me. So I went completely alone to show,
that's crazy.
not knowing anything about anything, knowing no one, not a soul there. It was an incredibly terrifying, wonderful growth experience altogether. But that was the biggest thing for me, was the unknown. I didn't know what a national show was like. I didn't know what the level of competition would be like. I had no clue. Everyone's asking and putting all this pressure on you saying, are you going to get your pro card? Are you going to win? And I'm like, I don't even know what a national show is like. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. It was just a wonderfully terrifying experience, but I hope I don't lose that with bodybuilding. I hope that it doesn't become something casual with me because it was the most exciting experience.
Yeah, that's pretty
I'm
cool.
sorry.
And competing, talk a little bit about what that was like for you, just stepping on stage. Was it comparable at all to, competing in powerlifting and how you felt, or CrossFit and how you felt, and anything like
No,
that?
no. When you're competing in a strength sport, you're literally going through your mental checklist so you don't die, because with powerlifting, you open with a squat. So you, from the beginning, you walk out there, you may be nervous before you unrack the bar, but you have to be so in tune with your internal checklist that I don't even see anyone in front of me. And I'm sure that it'll be like that with bodybuilding eventually, but my first show, it was a lot easier because you could not see past the stage. The lights were so bright that I couldn't see if someone was in the audience, you know, saying whatever, seeing whatever, making faces, couldn't see it. So I was okay once I realized, hey, I can't see anyone, it doesn't matter. The national show, I could see of everyone's nose. I could see every judge, you could see everyone. And I remember walking out from my routine and I made eye contact with Sandy and I forgot my routine for a minute. And I was like, I'm a bird. But it was the most terrifying, wonderful experience doing that. I was always first out on stage. I had no idea where I was supposed to go or, what I was supposed to do. I think after I won my pro card, I won my class. I thought that was it. And I'm sobbing off stage, just, completely shocked and sobbing. And I think the expediter was back there and he was like fanning me. He's like, you need to stop crying. And I'm like, why? And he's like, because you've got the overall you have to go out for right now. And I was like, what's the overall? I don't even know, no idea about any of this. So it was really just one of those things that you do it and then you think about how terrified you were later.
Mhm.
But that to me, outside of training, that was the part I loved the most about the sport was the absolute vulnerability and terror that you feel, even though you're confident and you've done everything you need to do and you're confident in your physique, there's just something so vulnerable about displaying it in front of everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I have so much respect for anyone who does this. Anyone. I mean, the place that you have to go to even make it that far, everyone has a story.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you really are kind of putting your ego right there on the line, and I think it over time, I think it helps chip away at that ego and kind of put you in a spot to be like, everybody is, like you said, everybody is here, everybody does have a story.
This podcast is sponsored by Smoking Gun Coffee, a veteran-owned coffee company that strives to give back to those in need. Don't forget to use code TWR10 for a 10% discount at checkout.
I think my first show, I remember you talk about life changing. I saw a girl downstairs, and her coach was literally putting her arms in position for the poses. And the first thing that came to my mind was, well, it's a little late to be learning your poses. This catty thing that came to my mind. Come to find out, she had had a stroke and been on life support and had lost so much motor function and it was like clinically dead. Or I mean, it was this incredibly wild story. And she'd done this anyway and put herself out there anyway. And I was just thinking, what are we capable of? What are we really capable of? Look at what this woman is doing. I think that it really separates the ego when you understand that there are people who shouldn't even be here that are doing this. It's incredibly amazing. Like you said, it does chip away at the ego because you're facing harsh criticism. You're giving people the right to tell you what what needs to be changed. And I think that was something that I was really terrified. I wasn't sure how the feedback would come in. I wasn't sure if it would be mean or I didn't know. I had no way of knowing anything. So I think it was more the unknown that I was nervous about in regards to like the feedback and things like that. But you have to dig right in, I guess.
Does it feel weird for you at all knowing like, okay, I'm an IFBB pro, and you still kind of like have all this like stuff that you're still trying to learn and figure out and kind of grow through within the sport?
It is, but I know at the end of the day that it's not me, that anything I've done has just been the grace of God. Because if you knew my life and the things that I'd overcome and survived, I shouldn't be here, So I was almost laughing when I went on stage. I really kind of was inside because I thought, here I am. I'm a redneck from Eastern Kentucky who's never even been to a national show. 6 weeks ago, I had never competed before and got my pro card. I thought this is God. Like, this is absolutely the grace of God in my life. And once you know that it's not you that's doing all these things and making all this happen, then I can settle in and know now that, the title, the card is great. I'm so excited for it, but I don't just want to be a pro. I want to be a good pro. I don't want to be one of these people who got their card and that's it. They may do one show and they get 30-second place. And, I really wanted to be a good pro. I didn't want people to think that this was just, a fluke. I wanted to be a good pro. So my mind was just immediately from switching phases to, okay, yes, we have a pro card, but now we start back at square one.
Yeah. And what does that
Right
look
back
like
there.
for you? What does square one look like as you're kind of learning more about how your body works in bodybuilding and what, foods may work better and not cause
Yeah.
more, inflammation and being able to train and all that kind of stuff.
Right. The hard part for me was not the initial reverse period because I was so disciplined at that point in time. That wasn't the issue for me. The hard part was, the health phases, where you're just waiting and checking, blood work. You're waiting for feedback from the judges to even know what you need to improve. I mean, I think that took like 6 weeks for me to get all of that sorted, to know what I even need to change, because you have these things in your mind. You think this, but what they're looking for is what matters. So that was the hard part for me, knowing that I was going to have to get uncomfortably big in order to make the changes that I need to make. Um, I think lat width was the biggest thing that the judges wanted, more lat width and maybe a little bit more bicep. So I have to be really careful with my lower body from powerlifting. I need to keep balance. So no more heavy squats, no more deadlifts, no more any of those things, because I need to make sure that I don't grow out of my class. But the hardest part, I think, was me just surrendering to the fact that the pros, the girls who go to the Olympia every year, they don't have to put on substantial size, so they can stay relatively leaner. But the hard part for me was not comparing myself to Miss Olympia, my first season before I turned pro, and understanding that this is my journey I'm walking, not hers. I have to stay focused on that and not be so self-critical, because with social media now, it's not like it was 20 years ago. You literally can see what the people you compete against look like.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at least what's not photoshopped anyway, but you can get ideas of what they look like at any point of the year, where 20 years ago you were looking at magazines, or photo shoots, if you even had an idea what so that was really hard for me, was learning that I'm walking my own road, that it's not anyone else's. So settling down with that. And then I started working with Andrew Vu 2 weeks ago. So I'm learning a completely different approach. So it's really exciting. I think this part is my favorite part. I
Yeah.
say that every part. I'm like, this is my favorite part, but it is. I love it.
And do you have kind of an outlook or like a goal of we want to step on stage at this point, or is it kind of just wait till I get what I need to get fixed, or what is that for you?
Well, the one thing with him is that he has, I think, like 40 some pro wins, so he knows what he's doing here. So I've told him that when he feels that I'm ready and have my package this coming year. So I'm really going to leave that completely up to him. If he says we're ready to go in April, the end of April or whatever, we'll go. If he says we're not ready to go until July, whatever. So I'm going to let him tell me when it's time, because I don't want to take the reins here. I really want him to. He's got the experience with this. He knows he's got Olympians, he knows when I'm ready more than I do.
Yeah.
So I'm really just absolutely doing everything he told me to do. And that way I'll know after my first pro show, I'll know what my potential is. I'll know
Yeah.
where I need to go. But I'm growing. I'm growing like a weed. So we're getting there.
That's good. That's good. Does it feel weird at all to you though that like just from what we were talking about before with like CrossFit and powerlifting, it felt more like you were kind of like in that control seat. You were in the pilot seat, you were making all the adjustments and tinkering and now it seems like, and I think in bodybuilding it's more like this where people have their coaches and their coaches are really good at what they do and they just, it's like, hey coach, what do I do here? And then you go execute that. Does it feel different being in that role now more where it's like I'm kind of being told what to do and then I just go do it versus let me make the decisions?
I get that aspect in coaching because I still, I coach right now quite a bit. Um, I think for me, it's almost liberating because I do have to be that for my clients. So it's liberating for me to be able to turn that part of my brain off and just execute because it still is up to me. If anything, it's more up to me now than it was with powerlifting because I have to execute everything. Diet code, cardio, training, posing, everything. I have to execute it and I have to execute it to the gram, to the minute, everything. So but having that part to turn off is very liberating. But because I have been in this area for a long time, I don't completely turn anything off. I am skeptical. I ask questions. I'm not a fool. I have limits. I'm not ignorant in protocols and things. So no longer will I ever completely turn off my brain when you're working with anyone because I feel like that's how bad things happen.
Yeah.
So I always keep some part of that brain going, but it's liberating to me to just when I go to the gym because there is something still within my control. If something doesn't feel good, I'll do something else. If I need to work around an issue or something's bothering me, I have enough experience to do those things. But it's just really liberating to just know, okay, this is what we do. This is what I'm eating, and not have to think about those things. It just takes energy.
Yeah.
You know, and then when I wanted to work with someone too that has far like a significant amount of expertise that I don't have. That way, I have confidence
Yeah.
in what he's doing. So one thing I'd been looking for was my 100% effort in the gym. Like what is 100% for you? What is everything, for you to complete effort? And I didn't think that I could find that unless I could turn that part of my brain off and just do what he was
Yeah.
telling me to do because it's really difficult to do both. And I'm so hard on myself. I think the biggest realization for me was when I looked back at pictures I did not post from my first and second prep because I thought I was fat. I thought I had still so much fat to lose. And I look back now and I was like, you were delusional. So if I had been running the ship, I would have destroyed my physique. I really would have destroyed my own physique because nothing that I saw would have ever been good enough. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So that was a big awakening for me when I looked back after the show and I was like, what is wrong with you? I literally hid in the gym to take those pictures because I was so embarrassed for anyone to see me with my shirt off that time. I thought I was so fat. And I look back now and I was like, this is why you don't coach yourself because you cannot see reality,
Yeah.
especially when you're driven like that. It's dangerous, really, truly.
Yeah. That's a good point as well, taking your health into consideration in that way, because there's only a certain amount that the human body can take. And when you're doing a bodybuilding prep, your coach, if you have a good coach, hopefully they should know that what that kind of breaking point is and keep you from going past that. And you yourself doing it, like you said, you start to lose the portion of your brain that's the reality portion, and then you go past that and then something bad happens, and then that's when maybe it's something that you can't come back from, which would be terrible
Yeah.
to think, but it's a reality.
And you're also playing with your life,
Yeah.
at this when you compete at a higher level, you're competing with your life. You're
Yeah.
you're, play, you're playing with your life here. So you really want to make sure that you have someone else with different eyes on you at all times to correct you even, because there are times with me that I train too hard. I push too hard and I won't back off when I need to. So it's always good for me to have people that can be honest with me and, say, okay, more cardio is not the answer here. That's not the thing here. More volume is not the answer here. Sometimes it's pulling back, it's in pulling back that you see the results. And that's something I would never do and often enough with myself, especially during bodybuilding preps. When someone tells you to eat an extra meal or take the day off of cardio, you're like, no thanks, no thanks. But it is perspective, because I think we really do need to be mindful and be honest with people that competing at the higher levels is not the most healthy thing. Just because we look our healthiest doesn't mean that, we are, or you would not be seeing bodybuilders die in their 30s and 40s, regularly. So I think we do need to be honest. And I think we also need to be honest. I've tried to be transparent with how your body's changed during the season, because, like you said, you do not look that way the entire year. Although some people do take multiple pictures in different outfits and spread them throughout the year and try to act like that, they are able to maintain that. That's something that happens. So I've tried to be honest and honest about the way I look all seasons, because understanding that if you do need to put on substantial size, you are going to have to let go of this image of leanness that you're holding on to. You're going to have to eat. You're going to have to be uncomfortable, and that's okay. That's okay. That your identity is not in your quad veins. That it
Right.
has nothing else. But I think it's really important, because women especially think that that you need to look that way year round in order to be successful and pleasing and an influencer, all the things right now. But it's not healthy, and it's not good for you competitively either.
Yeah.
You need to pull back and get your cycle back and get your hormones in check. And I'm just glad to see some more health focus moving into the sport.
Yeah. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. It was really great getting to chat with you.
Appreciate it, and I hope that more women in this area will see things like this and see that that it will open doors for other women who maybe were considering strength sport like this, but live in an area like we do, where you don't see other women who look like that. And I'm hoping that podcasts like this will kind of spread a little bit of awareness that there are women in this area who compete, and give people resources so that we can grow the strength sports, especially in Kentucky and West Virginia, for women.
If you want to, before we head out, if you want to share your social media or your website or anything like that, you can go ahead and do that.
I'm so bad. I had to. I had the same Instagram handle that they gave me, like how social media savvy I was when you first signed up. So now it's Tracy Jones _ IFBB Pro on Instagram, and my business is Warpath Performance Training. So if you're looking for coaching, you'll find me there. But I really appreciate this opportunity, and any opportunity for women in this area to get the word out.
If you're tired of searching for a coach or trainer, somebody who knows what they're talking about and has experience, make sure you go check out the new Coach's Corner on weightroompodcast.com. You can find quality, qualified coaches to help you achieve your goals, whether that's in bodybuilding or just general fitness. Stop wasting time and start achieving your goals today. The link to the Coach's Corner is down in the description below.